It's your boy Icon with a Netflix television review for you, going over that Cobra Kai. And before we get started, hit the like button, the notification bell, subscribe to my channel, and let's get started. So this episode actually starts with Sensei Kreese. Like, he's over in Japan, and him and Miss Kai, you know, she was in last season, she was one of the trainers that Terry Silver had brought into the fold. He's overseas in China, Japan, I believe Japan. He's over there, and he linked up with her. And when the two of them started having a conversation, she apologized to him because she was like, oh, when I was in America, she was like, I was looking for you, but you were in prison. And I actually forgot that he didn't have any interaction with her because it was her and Terry Silver the whole time. Like, the two of them were the ones who were in cahoots. And I forgot Kreese was in prison like in all last season. So the two of them actually get to see each other for the first time. And when they see each other, their interaction, it takes us to, like, you know, a flashback of back when Kreese, I guess, was in his 20s. And he trained under Kim's master. And as he trained, him and Terry Silver, they both trained under the master, and then the two of them were ready to leave. When they were ready to actually leave, he went to go say goodbye for the last time, and when he got there, he saw a young Miss Kim. As a child, she was hiding behind a rock, watching her grandfather train the students. Kreese saw that, but he didn't say anything. So he goes over to the master, and then he wants to say goodbye. And then after that, then, you know, the master's like, oh, you're going to America to become sensei, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks over, and he sees, like, Miss Kim, like, over there in the shadows, and then he calls her over. So then he starts, like, roughing her up, like, the master starts roughing her up because he was just like, oh, you want to be a part of martial arts, you cannot do it. And then he starts, like, picking on her and everything. And then Kreese says to him, he's like, well, master, you shouldn't be punishing her for wanting to learn. You should be training her. And then that's when the master was just like, oh, you think you want to be the sensei? He was, you know, then him and Kreese got into it. He whooped Kreese's ass. And while he was beating on Kreese, Kim ended up kicking the sensei to stop him from beating up Kreese, which is her grandfather. So then he's just like, oh, you dare strike your own grandfather. And then he grabs the poor child by the neck, and then he was just like, oh, do you fear me, child? And then she was like, no. She was like, I'm not afraid. And then he goes, well, good, now I can train you. Because his whole thing was he constantly saw her, like, hiding behind trees and, like, hiding in the shadows and, like, hiding in the corner. He wanted her to showcase, like, no fear and actually ask him to train her instead of her hiding, like, you know, in the shadows. So then that's how that whole thing happened. So now Kreese has come back, you know, he rolls up on him. And then now, like, Miss Kim, she's the one that's taken over from her grandfather. She's the one training the students. Mind you, when Kreese was there, he was, like, somewhere in his 20s. And Master Kim, at the time, he had to have been like 50 or 60 when he trained Kreese, because Kreese was young, and this dude was old. He had gray hair. He looked all wild and crazy. So when Kreese shows up, he's talking to Kim, and then he's just like, yeah, it's time for us to go to the Sekai Taikai, so this way we can enter Cobra Kai and, you know, like, and reign supreme. And then she goes, well, the decision is not mine to make. And I'm like, but you're the one that's training the students, so whose decision is it? She takes him to the place where he can talk to the person who's in charge of making that decision, and it's the same master from, like, back when he was 20. And I'm just like, how is this man still alive? like legitimately, how is this man, like, he's like old, he got wrinkles, he has full grown silky gray hair, but I'm like, but he had all that in the flashback. It's like literally the same person. So now I'm like, what the fuck? But then Kreese asked him, he was just like, oh, you know, it's time to take your teachings all across America. And then the master's like, no. You know, he's just that, you know, my daughter made promises, her ass can't cash, and you, Kreese, have been disappointment, you know, throughout this whole thing. And then they tried to talk to him. He was like, no. He was like, you know, we need to do it. We need to enter the tournament, and we need to prove that your style is, like, the most dominant style. So then the sensei, he's just like, okay. He's like, you want to prove yourself. So he's like, go to a cave and retrieve my favorite knife. Only then will you know what it means to be strong. Because there was a knife that he basically planted in a cave, and there was a white python that was guarding the knife. So Kreese goes in the cave, he tries to get the knife, the python bites him. When the python bites him, he starts hallucinating. He has hallucinations of different figures throughout the course of his life, and then one of them was like a young Terry Silver. And then Terry Silver said, he was like, no, I'm not your weakness, Kreese. And then he turned to his left, and then we find out that his actual weakness is Johnny Lawrence. So then him and Johnny get into it spiritually, and then he ends up fighting Johnny Lawrence, and he was like, yeah, Johnny, you were my weakness, but no more. And then, like, he ends up killing Johnny, like, in the dream sequence, and then, you know, he snaps out of the poison. He goes up, he takes the knife, and he cuts the head off the snake, literally. He brings the head of the snake back to the master, and he was just like, obtaining the knife wasn't about actually getting the knife. it was about mowing down whoever's in your way and whatever is trying to stop you from obtaining your objective. So then when the master saw he had cut the snake's head off, he was like, now you can trade my students for Cobra Kai. So now Kreese is back in the fold. And both him and Kim, they're now going to train like the next generation of like karate fighters, and they're going to use that to enter the Sekai Taikai tournament. Back in America, Johnny Lawrence and the rest of the fam, they're basically trying to decide what they're going to do about college, because it's time for Miguel to go to college and it's time for Robbie to go to college. While they're having this discussion, the roof of their apartment caves in and there ends up being a sewer leak. So Johnny sends everybody over to his apartment while he tries to get the super to fix it. Now Johnny, I believe, only had like a 1 or a 2 bedroom apartment. He now has himself, Carmen, Robbie, Miguel, the grandmother, and their unborn baby. All these people are now in a 2 bedroom apartment. So then Carmen says to him, she's like, what are we going to do? Because we're currently in a 2 bedroom apartment. There's like 7 of us. There's a baby on the way. And you're like taking money part-time for being a karate instructor. She was just like, where are we going to live? Like, we need more space. So he goes out into the world to try to find like a house or like a bigger apartment, which he can't get because his funds don't exactly measure up. So he gets the bright idea to go to Russo and try to get a job with Russo at the car dealership. Because Russo told him, he was just like, it's time to put the part-time gigs behind you and it's time to do what I do and like become, get like a 9 to 5. He took that as, you're offering me a job at your company. So now Johnny Lawrence works at the car dealership, which is funny because he's actually good at it. He even sold a car to like this very nice old lady, and the lady said like, oh, I'm going to send all 9 of my friends here to buy cars from Johnny Lawrence. Daniel wasn't going to turn that money down. So now Johnny and Daniel work together at the car dealership, which I think is going to be hilariously entertaining. And then finally, Miguel ended up getting the bright idea because he wanted to go to like a big 4-year school. But now that he knows that his parents can't really afford it, he decided to maybe look into community college, because they said that if you go to the community college, you can pretty much go either really cheap or you can go for free. You can go there for 2 years, you can get your grades up, like you can get your GPA up, and then you can just transfer to a 4-year school, but only do 2 years. So he ends up going to the local Valley College, where they bump into their old friend Kai, who was the Asian dude with the big mouth that was on the Cobra Kai team but got his ass whooped and then he quit. The two of them get into it, like they ended up reuniting, having conversations together. They find out that Kai was trying to pledge a frat that treated him like shit, and then they said that despite the fact that, he was doing all the errands for them and he was being their gopher, they still weren't going to put him in the fraternity. Miguel found out about that, and then he tried to tell him. Then like the frat guys got upset. They got into this whole big fight. But because these kids know martial arts, they whooped all their asses. And then after that, Kai and Miguel had a conversation where Kai basically told him, he said that when he was in high school, he basically he was fucking around. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. He didn't get his grades up. And now because of that, he has to go to the community college. He told Miguel, he was like, listen, if you have a dream that you want to chase, don't take the community college if you don't have to. He said, strive for the big fish. He said, if you want to try to get into that 4-year school, go for the 4-year school, because if it doesn't work, you can always come back to the community college. So now Miguel has some stuff to think about. That was how the episode basically ended, and thank you for tuning in. So now we're getting into tournament territory, because like I said, I'm very interested in the tournament this year. Like, that's the one aspect of the season so far. Like, obviously, I love the characters, I like the dynamic, but I really do just want to see where the tournament's going, because the girls there were no girls in this episode. Like, Kenny wasn't in the episode. Like, a lot of characters were missing. I assume they're going to be the focal point of the next episode. So we'll see what happens as we get closer, because now Cobra Kai's in the mix and we're ready to kick some ass. So share your questions, comments, and concerns down below, and we will continue to talk about it. Check me out on Twitter, check me out on X, always on YouTube and TikTok, where you can leave your questions, comments, and concerns. What did you think about this particular episode of Cobra Kai? I know there are 5 episodes out. If you saw all 5, don't spoil it in the comments. Share your thoughts on episode 2, and we'll have more as we continue. Check out my other reviews, because I have my Adventures of Superman, the season finale, up on my channel. I got that Suicide Squad Isekai, the review on Kite Man, and I do have footage from my time spent at New York Swimming. So thank you for tuning in, guys. So until next time, for some more Cobra action, look out for the prize, and peace.